get the theme that we're working for. It's kind of seeing God, following Him, hearing Him. And then it captivate us to take those steps He lays in front of us, to experience Him, to follow Him. We continue our series. As I mentioned last week, we're entering a new section of scriptures called the prophets, right? The major and minor, 17 books in all. And Isaiah is the first one. And it's difficult to cover Isaiah in just 3 weeks. And we're going to find out in all the books that we're going through, right? It's going to be difficult. But yet in that, we hope that we'll pull out stuff and just kind of grab our hearts and say, yeah, there's a truth there that applies to me now. There's an aspect of God dealing with His people that I really need to understand, that I fall in love with Him more. So we'll see that He's just, and He's merciful, and He's good. That His plans kind of are above the natural events of the day. It's true for the situation that was going on in Israel at the time, and it's true for us now. His plans kind of are larger, and they're going to be accomplished even in the events of our day. So it's a time of change, it's trying time, but yet our hope and our quest and our challenge is to be able to see that God is still moving now. And then we partner with Him in that. So Isaiah reminds us of that. I think this second part really spoke to me on that, the idea that God is there, and we need to be able to train our eyes and set our hearts in tune that we know how He's drawing us forward. And it's a good thing. So we're in the prophets, 17 books, 16 different authors. And it's that period of time where God's saying, you know, you are not totally given over to me. Your heart is divided. The things that are going on are pulling your eyes from me. And it's that He's using the prophets to speak to them warnings, tell them about oncoming judgment, but also mingle in there is that I would just bless you, I would pour out my blessings, I would do great things, just turn to me, right? And so in Psalm chapter 81, God speaking kind of captures kind of the theme of all the prophets, the 18 books we're looking at, and this is what it says. Hear, O my people, I will warn you. If you would but listen to me, O Israel, you shall have no foreign god among you. You shall not bow down to an alien god. I am the Lord your God, who brought you up out of Egypt. Open wide your mouth, and I would fill it. But my people would not listen to me. Israel would not submit to me. So I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own devices. If my people would but listen to me, if Israel would follow my ways, how quickly will I subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their foes? Those who hate the Lord would cringe before them, and their punishment would last forever. But you would be fed with the finest of wheat, with honey from the rock, I would satisfy you. Kind of that mingle in there, like, don't keep going the way you're going. And then if you turn to me, I've got some sweet things for you. And so that's the challenge there. We see some respond, we see sometimes they don't. We see the nation actually go through a very difficult time. But in the midst of that, God still kept His remnant, His faithful ones. The ones who said, yeah, even though the group, the whole community isn't, we're going to be faithful. So we're in Isaiah. And this kind of reminds you, last week we kind of went through and showed you the timeline again. And it's on your handout also. Just to kind of place it there. Because we went through the first books all the way to Chronicles, and that's the history of Israel that goes here. Now the prophets we're going to be looking at are all these guys right here. We see Isaiah right here. The divided kingdom, the northern kingdom, and the southern kingdom right here. And so even though 2 Kings and Chronicles we covered already, we even talked about the people coming back from Israel, and again we have to coming back to Israel, and then building the walls and stuff over here. We're actually talking about Isaiah preaching during this time. Right? So this is when he's talking over the span of 4 kingdoms, anywhere from 50 to 60 years. This guy started early. He was faithful. He continued to carry it, right? All the way to the end. I mean, what a testimony for us. For those who are young, for those who are middle-aged, for those who are old. We can continue to be God's chosen people. Right? That's a sweet thing, man. And so all the other folks we're going to be listening to and their contemporaries, you can see it kind of, Habakkuk was around there, Joel, Amos, Jonah, they're all about the same time. But we're looking at Isaiah. And we're looking at Isaiah in 3 parts. Last week we took a look at Isaiah himself, the person, his message, how unique he is, and then his commission, what grabbed him, right? What grabbed his heart. And today we're going to take a look at kind of the picture he paints of the Messiah, right? Of who he sees as God gives him that window into what's ahead of him. All the junk, all the stuff, all the competing events, the geopolitical stuff, nations moving against nations, and the prosperity and injustice, kind of seeing through that, and in seeing that he sees Israel coming back, he sees the Messiah come, he sees the church age, and he sees when Christ rules on the earth, he sees all this into the future. And it's kind of, when we go through Isaiah, it's like, that's kind of confusing. And what is he talking about right now? And so what I want to do is spend this time we have today just kind of taking a look as he looked into the future. And Peter kind of captured this kind of pretty well, this idea of looking into the future.